Jacobs from the Financial Times, and we're talking about reimagining careers in a longer life, which is an issue that's become more important to me the older I get. And I just wanted to, if everybody introduce themselves and explain why they're here. Lyndsey.
Perfect. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Lyndsey Simpson. I'm the founder and the CEO of 55 Redefined group of companies. We are age-enabling global organisations. So we're the leading provider of age intelligence around their workforce, but also provider of technology so that they can lean into the opportunities that comes with an ageing population rather than see it as a threat.
Hi, I'm Octavius Black. I'm the co-founder and executive chair of MindGym. We're a psychology business that helps major companies organise their culture in order to improve performance. And I'm very delighted last year to have launched our well-working research paper on how organisations can play a critical role in having healthy, happy and productive workforces. And as of last week, I'm delighted to say I was appointed chair of the Jobs Foundation Employers Task Force. And our role there is to build an accreditation scheme for employers who do a great work in bringing people into work who wouldn't otherwise be there, particularly older generations.
I'm Brent Hoberman. I'm here to learn, really. I'm an outsider. But what do? I do venture capital, so first minute capital, so we invest in lots of startups, including some in related spaces to this. Our Founders Factory, Incubator and Accelerator, where we've run accelerators for people like Nesta, actually, into the aging economy. And Founders Forum, where we convene entrepreneurs and launch businesses to support them and run accelerators for all sorts of things. So there is some areas there where we build communities of entrepreneurship, and that can also be for younger entrepreneurs normally, but could be for older entrepreneurs, which I think we'll get to. Yeah.
So if we have a nice, easy question to answer first, how do you think we should think about careers over a longer lifespan, Lyndsey?
So I am an ageaholic, actually, I would say. I'm obsessed with unlocking the potential of our older population, and particularly of how we age through work. And I believe that we have demonised work as a Western society and made out that work is bad and retirement is good. And actually, I think we need to unbreak that connection. We work with some of the world's largest corporations around the world, everyone from Amazon, Diageo, AXA, every industry. And what we find is none of them are longevity literate. There hasn't been a boardroom of any business that I've been in the last 5 years that has understood the impact of age on their workforce. So they'll understand the ageing profile of their workforce. They'll know whether they're 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% over 50. But they won't know what that means. They won't know that an over 50s employee in their business is 200% less likely to take a day off work sick than an under 30s employee. They won't know that 9 out of 10 colleagues over 50 are happy at work, whereas only 3 out of 10 colleagues in work under 30 are happy. They won't have tracked promotion velocity. They won't have tracked income by age. They won't have tracked customer outcomes by age. And when you start to lift the lid of not just, and I'm not a proponent that just says over 50 is better, I'm a proponent that multi-generational is better. But you see that we bring things of different age at every stage of our life. And once we start to see the data is what unlocks organisations. And when we unlock those organisations, then they have an incentive to create good work into people's 60s, 70s and beyond. And if I just call out one company or two companies in the UK, for example, so AXA in the UK, their workforce are now aged 17 to 84 and elongating in both directions. And Veolia, water treatment, waste management works, they have half of their workforce are over 50, but the golden 1% are now over 75 and thriving. And so there are ways of doing it, but there is a minority that need to drag the majority with them.
Octavius, what you think?
So I totally agree with Lyndsey. The pathologising of work has done enormous harm to our understanding of what leads for a happy and healthy life. We talk about work-life balance as if the two are opposing the other. The demon of work is only replaced by the joy of life afterwards. This is a completely misreading of the situation. We suggest retirement is something to look forward to and a joyful outcome, when it's often the first stage since we were a child that we lose routine, we lose purpose, we lose social connection, we lose our sense of being relevant. And therefore we should be wary of retirement in its traditional sense rather than embracing of it. And so I think there's an enormous opportunity to redefine work through the stages. One of the challenges we have is that we associate growing in our career with earning more money. So we think that as we get older, we get promoted, we become more senior, and we should earn more as a result. What the research shows is that peak earnings are between the age of 40 and 50. So if we're going to carry on working to 75 or longer, we need to associate differently what our financial expectations should be. Now, the way the market tries to solve this now is it removes people from the official workplace. They become consultants. And as you know, I earn £1,000 a day as a consultant. I'm very valuable. But they end up doing 3 days' work for the 1 day they earn. So they end up paying their market rate. Now, this is not a sustainable model. We can't have the older populations relying entirely on being consultants or non-executive directors if they're at that peak age. We need to create an environment where it's quite normal for us to understand that after a certain stage, we may be paid less. We may be going to more junior, as they were traditionally called, roles. But otherwise, we get people who don't get the chance to have a job because they're told you're overqualified. You've been a CFO, you'll never want to do this. Whereas actually you might well want to do this, just on a more flexible arrangement and on a more discrete arrangement. So I think the idea that you should stop having a routine, a structure, a purpose, a sense of mission, which you have from the age of 5 to the age of 50 to 60 something, and then suddenly it goes, this is a good thing, misunderstands the psychology of work. And therefore psychology, rather than being a cause of ill health, is often a cure.
Great. Well, I'm certainly one who doesn't believe in, famously, in work-life balance. And I agree with the panelists that that's totally a sort of cultural thing that we need to help people find work they love, and then it becomes something they enjoy. As for sort of elderly, I guess I'm representing the tech industry, and there we are ageist, and I am guilty of that myself a bit. I sort of think, I use my own example, said I was never a better CEO than when I had kids who were too young and I could throw 7 days a week at a business and whatever. However, I think as I enter the older cohort, I think one has to say yes, you can adapt and you can still add value. And I think, but the biggest thing for me in this world where skills are changing so fast is to help the people over 50s keep abreast of new technology. So I love the sort of reverse mentoring type things. I love all the platforms where you can really reskill quickly. There's a small company we've invested in called GetSetUp.io. It's an American company where the elderly, it works with AARP and people like that, where actually it's not the young teaching the elderly this time. It's the elderly, it's a platform where the elderly teach the elderly. So they feel more familiar about these new technologies and these new skills. So I think more things like that where we can be comfortable that when we're talking to people over 50s that they understand and that they are enhanced by, let's face it, AI, because actually what I don't want to do is have employees who don't get AI because they'll be so much less productive than everyone else. So if that's an elderly employee, then they are much less valuable. But if we can make them use those tools just as much as the younger generation, then they can be, with their wisdom, they can be even more productive.
So is AI a cure for ageism, or how will it help the older workforce or hinder them?
Well, I think AI is curiosity for me in work. So it's curiosity and skills, yes. So in other words, if you stay curious, AI after all now, it's knowing what questions to ask. It's Sam Altman who said that, not me. It's really, if you think about prompting, it's just, can you ask the right questions and do you know the right tools? And then it's, can you reskill yourself? Now we can package that up much more cost effectively and simply with AI to reskill people. So yes, I think it can make, and it also helps people more work from anywhere. If the argument, and I hate remote work, but I get it when you're older, if the argument is you want to work from anywhere a bit more, AI is also a very good tool to do that. So I think yes, it can make the elderly more productive. And it also can do things like make remote work better. It's like, I think I've got granola recording this, granola is the best AI note taker. Full disclosure, we're investors. But what it means is that you can share work. It makes it easier. Your whole teams can use tools like this, so you can be remote effectively and understand. So your elderly person, if they're not in the office every day, or anyone who isn't, then they can be up to speed on what's going on.
Do you think AI is a risk or a boost?
A boost. I've got two views on it. I am also going to say that I think words and language are important, and I don't know any older employees that want to be called elderly. I think 50 is now our midlife, and so I'm, level 47. I talk about ages in levels. People generally want to go up levels than they do ages, so they will declare their level 60, level 75. But I think that word elderly in itself suggests frailty, suggests illness. It suggests road signs with a dottery, cane. So I think we have to get better at how we describe our midlife workforce and call them midlife, and not forget that our millennial population are going to be turning 50 in 6 years, in 2031. But with regards to AI, I've got two lenses on it. So one is I have the pleasure of having one of the directors of LinkedIn sit on my board as a non-exec director. So we share data across the platforms. And if I go back 2.5 years, all of the hiring globally on LinkedIn for AI roles were young coders. They were people in their 20s that come straight out of university, college, and everyone was in a race to build their own AI solutions and automate their businesses. The second that, ChatGPT and then Copilot and every other version of AI off-the-shelf tools became available, the pendulum swung in the complete opposite direction. So all hiring for AI is now led by people that can train the AI. And for that human in the loop, they need to be the most experienced and the most knowledgeable and the most able to reference whether the AI is producing crap information or brilliant information. And so if I look at just a bank who's maybe looking at automating and using AI to triage calls coming into their contact centre, do they need their young coder who's brilliant at coding the AI, or do they need, Elizabeth, who's worked in the contact centre for 50 years and knows the 34 different ways that people ask to change their address? They need Elizabeth. But to do that, they need to train Elizabeth and give her confidence that she can switch from being a contact centre operator to a trainer of large language AI models. The second perspective, if I may, is we have built our own train on our own large language model. She's called Rosa. She's a runner-on-set assistant for one of our film set games that we put midlife employees through. And we see that people in midlife are using Rosa in 3 very different ways. So a third of the cohort use her, as you would say, like a researcher. So you've told me I'm going to live to 100, prove it. Show me the data, give me the report. I want to find out more. I want to dig into this topic and find out more. The second group treats Rosa as almost a digital coach. How do I hold myself to account? What do other people ask when they get to this point in their journey? What are other people doing, and how do I make sure that I take action and this doesn't just become a nice thing to do? And the third think that Rosa is human. And so they all go, "Morning, Rosa. You'd be so proud of me. I had this great conversation with my wife last night, and we had the big conversation about me retiring, and I would never have done it without you. Night, night, see you in the morning." And they're interjecting. And so when I hear this morning's debates around healthcare and these 18-month wait lists, I just think the huge opportunity to create digital interactions before they interact with a human is such a missed opportunity, but workplaces are embracing it with speed.
And are you finding AI in the recruitment process a hindrance or a help? I mean, I think we often talk about it as for graduates whose only experience is AI, basically, and that's a very dehumanising experience when they're not met by an interviewer, a human, I think we used to call them. But and so are you finding that's reinforcing some of the biases?
So we don't provide recruitment services, but we own a jobs board. And so we had about 45,000 people in the UK apply for jobs through us last year. And the overwhelming feedback is that they crave human interaction. And so Amazon, one of our clients recently had to strip out one of their AI recruitment tools because it was systematically discriminating against female applicants. And so I think AI can speed up workflows, but it cannot replace the human in recruitment journeys. I think it's actually having a more disproportionate effect on younger cohorts, on graduates and apprentice level cohorts, than it is actually older applicants who are either applying to go sideways and backwards or unretire, or they're skilled professionals in a field and therefore they're coming into a more skilled recruitment journey. But those that are early in their career and first-time job seekers, I think it's having a disproportionately negative impact.
And Octavius, I was interested in your demonisation of work. How do you evangelise about work? And do you think that retirement will be a blip in the kind of future, that this period that we've had of retirement?
I mean, retirement made enormous sense. If you go back to Andrew's research started in the 1920s, people doing blue-collar work, who were working incredibly physically demanding work. It was very hard to continue doing that work after a certain stage, and therefore having a moment to relax and recover at the end of a long life of committing to arduous work in health and safety challenging situations. We've seen early worthy and responsible. Nowadays, we're mostly in white-collar jobs or jobs that aren't particularly physically demanding, and actually the loss of work is an incredibly bad situation to be in. It's a big cause of mental health problems. We've got a big growth in mental health issues in the UK at the moment, and that's made worse by people having a sick note culture. You'll have seen from Charlie Mayfield's report this week, encouraging people to see the solution to a mental health issue is to stop work, whereas actually the solution to many mild mental health issues is to get work and to be in work and to do work that matters. So I think the demonisation of work is really mission critical, but we see that it's a very hard psychological shift to make. When PwC wanted to rename their consulting arm Monday, there was uproar because Monday was supposed to be the worst day of the week because you have to go back to work. But actually, if you've been in a difficult marriage or screaming children or whatever else you've had all weekend, you might be or doing lots of DIY that you're not very good at. You might be absolutely delighted to go back to work on Monday morning.
My wife's laughing.
So the demonisation of work is a real problem. But I think the research shows very clearly that when we have purpose in life, when we have doing something that we think is relevant and meaningful, we're likely to be, our physical health is improved, our mental health is improved. And there's lots that employers can do to help generate this. So we can start to think differently about the kinds of people that we're employing and when we're employing. I remember talking to the head of Deloitte UK about increasing his workforce and how he could get more good people in the talent pool. His immediate assumption was to go to school leavers and avoid university, which has a lot of sense because quite a lot of degrees don't add an enormous amount of value, and you might well be better off getting school leavers from the beginning. But what you can do instead is to think about older generations. And where I think AI becomes particularly helpful, and we've got the world's most predictive psychometric for anticipating leadership success. So rather than going for CV points or for whether you went to a Russell Group university, we can actually pick out the personality traits and the competencies and the types of motivation that are most likely to lead you to be successful in a future role. So that removes a lot of the biases that might be in there. Did you go to such and such a place? What kind of degree did you get? What A-levels did you get? And it makes you much more likely to hire people who are going to be more successful, who might be of any age background. So I think there's an enormous scope for technology, data, AI to remove some of these barriers, but we have to remove the psychological break on assuming we should keep earning more money. And I'll just share one little psychology experiment to illustrate this. They got a group of people to sort Gary Larson cartoons. So I remember Gary Larson, these are quite funny cartoons. You had to sort them by theme. And one group was asked just to sort them by theme. And the other group was asked to sort them by theme and got $1 for each pile they completed. And so the interesting question was which group went for longer and enjoyed it more. And the group that wasn't paid enjoyed the task more and kept at it longer than the group that was paid. So paying people actually demotivated them and made them enjoy an enjoyable task less. So when I talk about the pathology of work being a bad thing, that's a really good example of exactly the same activity being seen as worse because I'm being paid to do it.
So we should not pay older people.
Not at all, but we should redefine what work is about. And what that allows is to have be paid less. Because my identity is all about how much I'm paid, then it's going to be an impossible scenario to keep people working to 75 when employers see their maximum values of 40 to 50. Now, we may well be able to get exceptions by training them in skills and giving them new AI tools that will give outliers and exceptions. But in the main, we're going to find that people older are maybe less valuable, and that's fine. But that is a normal distribution or a bell curve, and that should be perfectly healthy and normal. But the only way we address that is by redefining why we're doing work, and that work can be a source of joy and prestige, and most importantly, relevance. We all want to be relevant in some way or other, and work provides a relevance that not working, playing croquet or bridge or crochet in the evenings loses, as well as your social connections are much less. You end up being with people of a similar background, a similar age group and so forth, whereas actually what you want to be or want to learn from is people, as Brent talks about, younger people or much older people from different backgrounds, who you're much more likely to meet at work, especially if you're in the office, than you are in retirement.
But how do you make that shift within an organisation? I mean, I always find that these things are good for other people, you know. Other people can get paid less as they...
Yeah, I mean, Unilever have done a really good job on this. So they have a programme whereby rather than people leaving the workforce, they come as employees. They stay on with the benefits, often healthcare benefits are very important, especially as you're getting a bit older. But what they do is they have a fixed number of hours and they have fixed tasks to do. And therefore they're in effect paid less, they're less expensive employees, but they're still part of the Unilever campus, they still feel a loyalty to the company, and they're still able to add and contribute things that younger people might not be able to do or could do, but they've chosen to keep the people who know the business well. So I think you can structure the work in different ways. Obviously flexibility is really important. Obviously skills are really important, but actually staying as part of the team but being paid different amounts for different kinds of work is a way forward.
And Brent, you talked about your own ageism. Do you see it among investors, and how do you encourage older entrepreneurs to keep going, really?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Look, obviously, if you're a tech investor, you're looking at some of the people I saw. We ran an event last week in New York, and you know, we've got people 21 years old who are dropping out of Harvard and MIT presenting, and you're like, I want to back them. So that's much more the typical cliche than the 60-year-old coming up saying, I'm really experienced, please back me. I've built this and this. But I think what you can highlight is, you know, there is good data coming out of second, third time entrepreneurs or of older entrepreneurs and how much they, you know, how successful they are. So I think, you know, it's absolutely, as I was alluding to earlier, we run cohorts for disabled entrepreneurs or for younger entrepreneurs or whatever. You could easily see companies like us or Nesta or others running cohorts for over 50 entrepreneurs and shining a light and saying, here are people who are doing really well and the success. So if you shine a light on the successful entrepreneurs older, and I do think as an investor, what I'd love to see is what Octavius was alluding to, is those diverse teams where you've got the 60-year-old with the 20-year-old, you know, and that I can believe is going to be really powerful. But I think it's also going into sort of how can you break down understanding people's skills better. So it is, actually, we've mentioned LinkedIn, you know, micro-credentialing. Reid Hoffman used to talk a lot about micro-credentialing. It's like, what is that? What are those micro skills and, you know, the badges that show what those are? LinkedIn's good at that. I also think elderly people, I'm a huge advocate of something like LinkedIn, but I bet the over 50s are less good at it. You know,
they're not on it. Only 16% of over 50s are on LinkedIn, and most of them in central London.
Seems to be full of them.
Yeah, it's your central London. You go to Newcastle, Sunderland, it's less than 8%.
Yeah, so I think getting those people onto those platforms where they're visible, so making them visible because it's important. And then I think companies like Beamery, another unicorn British startup, that work out where talent is, what are the actual skills within companies and corporations and talent. So expanding those out further so that you can, and again, it's a combination of those talent skills, micro-credentialing, platforms like LinkedIn, where I can say, okay, I need somebody who understands how to do exactly this. And then you really will be, I don't care about the age, it's, I need this skill, can they do it? It doesn't matter what age. But I think there's also a marketing thing that I'm sure we've been alluding to a lot today. It's like when you're now in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, you can be a lot sharper than the traditional, than what we think about. In New York, I met a mentor of mine, a former board member of mine. She's 84 years old. And she is brilliant at mentoring. She's running around my event, mentoring all these entrepreneurs. One of the UK's, I probably won't say which, but a UK company worth $8 billion, the founder, the AI founder, had dinner with her on Thursday night in New York because she's adding huge value to him with that breadth of wisdom and contacts and all of that. So those sort of pairings are super powerful, and we need to have more platforms that enable them.
So should we set up older worker employee resource groups? I mean, I have seen a few. I think they call them experienced employee resource groups rather than older. But is that something that you think is a good strategy?
I mean, most of the companies we work with have an ERG or BRG, employee resource group or business resource group. Either they do two things. So either it's dedicated purely on their older workforce, so their 50 plus generation, or in the US 45 plus. You're deemed as a senior at 45 plus. Bit of a scare. Or their generations. So their entire intent is to bring their youngest and their oldest cohorts together to see how do we support 5 generations working alongside each other with different communication preferences, different styles of working, different motivators. And so I think the ERGs are hugely powerful, actually. They become a problem if they're not supported by HR, because they then become like a mini trade union of what's not right around here. But if they're embraced by the business and HR, and to your point around purpose, Octavius, tasked to solve problems, how do we do market-leading recruitment advertising where age is invisible? You know, where we clearly are celebrating people joining our business of every age and of every level, and storytelling around that. You know, how do we create brilliant consumer campaigns on Instagram that will appeal to 5 generations of consumer purchasers, a bit like Belstaff do a brilliant job of making their biker jackets ageless. They have models from their 20s to David Beckham in the middle to in their 90s modelling the same jacket. And so I think Employee Resources Group have a huge opportunity to support. But actually there are some very easy tactical things that organisations can do. So if I look at the room today, I should imagine there's a proportion of people that are more on the academic side of things, and perhaps a proportion that are more in healthcare. And so I was with Specsavers last year as we launched in Parliament the Hearing Health report, and that untreated hearing loss is a key indicator to dementia, and that 40% of early retirees did so because that they had experienced hearing loss at work, but it's not as cool to wear hearing aids at work as it is to wear a pair of thick-rimmed specs right now. And so part of my job, our job in organisations, is to just normalise all this stuff. So I challenge our ERGs and our businesses to drive hearing health. You know, why are they not if they're giving out vouchers for sight tests, why are they not giving everybody hearing tests? Why are they not celebrating the people at every level in their organisation who have hearing loss and sharing their stories? And they will prevent 40% of their early retirees from doing so. And we're seeing that already. Those little changes make a huge impact. A cornerstone are telecoms. They provide all of the masts across the UK and provide all of the infrastructure to the telecom system. Yet 60% of their workforce are white, male and over 50. And at the moment, they would retire at around 58. So we're all screwed, guys. You know, we love our mobile phones, but unless anybody's keeping the infrastructure going and adding 10 years to their careers and bringing through the next generation, we cease to have a telecoms network. And so we posed this question. We got 300 of their leaders together to stand up if they had hearing loss, and a third of the room stood up, and only one person had ever declared at work that they had hearing loss. So little things that we need to just start talking about and normalising, which means that we make these 50, 60, 70-year careers just completely normal.
I mean, Octavius, do you, when I've spoken to other people, they've said that they get called in to talk about the Gen Z problem because everyone's worried about it, about young people adapting to the workforce and so on. But do you get called in to talk about older workers?
Sadly not,
No.
Not at all.
Because they ring me, Octavius.
I mean, how do you kind of get over the generational divide, really?
I think we talked about AI earlier, and I think this is a very interesting area. So there's some recent research by BCG that says the barrier to success for businesses adopting AI is 30% tech stack, 70% talent stack. So actually it's the culture and the ability to cycle around the learn, adapt, act move as quickly as possible that creates the impetus to learn from AI, to adapt it, to try it out. So if you're not confused, you're not paying attention kind of line, but you can keep learning and keep adapting. So what we're doing is helping organizations create what we call AI agility, which is how do you 10x the speed at which you make decisions, how do you remove barriers to decision making like overdone collaboration or fear of failure. And that's where wise people who've been in the business for quite a long time can actually make quite strong decisions, use their judgment in order to accelerate things, can work out what's going wrong in the organizational system that's slowing things down and speed things up. So what we do quite a lot of is help improve organizations focus on judgment. So how can we find ways of improving judgment amongst people, avoiding heuristics, shortcuts in psychology, the way your brain works that make you make wrong calls, but also how do we accelerate the use of people's judgment as a value to be generated and to be adopted. And that, of course, leads to more experienced people who've got honing their judgment off years of having done the job.
Casper, aren't more experienced people, don't they have a lower tolerance for failure? So are they more worried about failure?
The science suggests that they may be, but not emphatically. But that's a part of the reskilling. So what is it that they fear of failure for? They fear of failure of losing their job. For example, BBC Today, fear of failure, made a couple of errors, and now it's all kibosh. But what we can see is that older people, if they're not fearing that risk of losing their job because they've got flexible employment, because we've got part-time, because we've got all sorts of things, and they're brought in for the purpose of the task is to move things faster, to try and make things work more, accelerate that journey, then they'd be more inclined to do it. So you can combine judgment with removing fear of failure, which tends to be an organisational barrier rather than an age barrier. Yeah.
It's a great point you make, though, Brent, because so fear of failure is something that comes out a lot in organisations, and particularly when they're hiring people of every age. So one of the ways you break this disconnect between age equals senior equals more paid is by hiring people at every age and at every level and every salary band, rather than hiring young, training them, and then it's only those long service employees that can, stay for the long term that make the senior grades. But when we look at that as an induction challenge, what we see is that older cohorts of new joiners typically have a higher fear of failure of looking stupid. So if I go back to that contact centre analogy, if I look at, and we have a contact centre epidemic of turnover. So most of the organisations in the UK and Western Europe that have contact centre operations are seeing on average a 30 to 50% turnover in staff every 12 months. So if you hire an over 50, they will take longer to train. They will not just hit the phones and wing it, because they're like, I'm going to look an idiot. I don't want to talk to a customer until I know how to navigate the system. I want to know why this is done like this and how it works before you expose me to a threatening conversation where I look foolish. But you don't then have to teach them telephone skills, empathy, listening, engagement, and how to support a customer at the end of the phone. So what we see is that you'll hire a mixed age group cohort and you have to spend twice the amount of time with your younger cohorts teaching them human skills, how to get across empathy through a phone call, how to listen actively, how to engage on the telephone, how to manage conflict on a telephone, and a fraction of the time on the technology, because I don't care. If I get it wrong, I'll just put my hand up and get my line manager to intervene, and I don't feel the concern. Whereas our older cohorts, you spend a fraction of the time on the human side, and you need to invest a little bit more on giving them confidence around the technology and the risk of embarrassment.
Do you see any difference between men and women in kind of older cohorts? I spoke to Vicar recently, and he said the Church of England is kind of fueled by female empty nesters that want a second career. And so I don't know whereas their husband might be settling down to retirement. I don't know, have you experienced differences?
So we support a lot of the female platforms in the UK. So Noon, which is one of the, I suppose, probably largest midlife female platforms. We are their career content and jobs board. And we acquired a business called WM People last year, which was working mums, working wives, working dads, etc. We see that there are a cohort of women, particularly in their 50s, as you say, empty nesters. Their kids are going to college or university, and they're coming back going, right, finally, it's my time. You know, I'm no longer in the you're about to have kids era. I'm no longer in the you're looking after kids era. I'm in the it's my fucking time era. And they're being told to go and apply at B&Q and John Lewis or Waitrose. And no one's taking a 25, 30-year view, going somebody in their early 50s can retrain to be anything. Why can't they be a financial advisor? Why can't they be the next data scientist? Why can't they be joining you as a graduate apprentice in your social media cohort in an advertising business and have desires to be an account director and leading key accounts? So what we see is there's a huge desire, but they need employers to specifically say, we're talking to you. We're talking to you. And so a brilliant example who've done this well is Sky. So I had my Wi-Fi went down in London a few weeks ago, and this fabulous woman came to my flat. She regretted, I think, the 4 flights of stairs as she's lugging, her kit and a caboodle to redo all the engineering in the flat. And she was clearly in her mid to late 50s. So I said to her, so if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been an engineer with Sky? And she said, about 3 years. I said, did you do an engineering degree? Did you start off in this field? And she laughed her head off and she said, I was a waitress at Harvester, and then I stopped work for 20 years, and then I saw an advert on Facebook that said, do I have a driving licence? Am I happy to go into people's homes? Am I interested in training and learning a new profession? Tick, tick, tick. It had a woman like me in the image. I applied, and now I've got my van, I've got my kit, and I'm here until I drop. I never, ever want to stop being an engineer for Sky. And so there are just ways of calling out audiences and inviting them to be relevant to them.
Have you seen anything to the men one day?
What I love about your story, yes, we absolutely do. People, the 5 drivers of well-being at work. One is purpose, which we talked about quite a lot, and again, really strong correlates with purpose and mental health conditions and physical health conditions. One is belonging, which is social connection, which I imagine is part of going out to people's homes and meeting customers, but is also with colleagues at work and seeing people are different from me. A third one is autonomy. This is really important. So in countless studies across multiple cultures, in multiple professions, they found there's one group of working people who are more positive about work, who are happy with their work-life balance, Deborah used that phrase again, and who earn less money. And they're the self-employed because they have autonomy. So there's something organisations can do to create a sense of autonomy. The next one is competence. I feel able to do what is asked of me. So that's where the reskilling comes in, and the help and support, having enough resources, expectations of timelines and so forth, in order to be able to feel that I don't quite know how to do it, but there's a way I can do this somehow or other. And the fifth one is certainty. And the more we are not having unpleasant surprises at work, the happier and healthier we're likely to be. So we're talking about older generations only, but Andrew talks about all generations in the telescope, and I think that these 5 drivers apply at all stages. And we have a massive problem in this country of people of younger ages not working because of health conditions and the needs and so on and so forth. And actually employers can play a massive role there as well. So I think across the world of work, there's an awful lot employers can do to create these 5 conditions that make people feel more positive about work, that create long-term health conditions, and they apply equally across men and women.
Interestingly, one of the things that helps people stay in work the longest, but equally helps our youngest cohorts that are joining work right now, is around creating fractional, more flexible work. So I make no secret of the fact that I want to retire the term retirement. I'm very vocal about that topic. But I don't believe that you should just work until you drop, or you should work doing bad work or things you don't enjoy. So I believe there's 10, 15-year glide paths where we work less and live more. And we adjust the type of work that we do to become more purposeful. Interestingly, where we then work with companies that have an older proportion of older workers that are desperately trying to keep them, the Schneider Electrics of the world, where all of our power is powered by an older workforce. When they introduce fractional and flexible work, they get more applications from younger cohorts. So people that are just entering the workforce now are not wanting full-time work for a single employer. I want to work 3 days a week for you and learn that, and I want to do my hairdressing side hustle on here and my little thing selling trainers on Instagram over here. And so they have a different design that's more, I suppose, autonomous, more, plural in nature, where I'm going to do a variety of careers, and therefore I'm going to gravitate to the employers that aren't going to put me on a 2-year graduate programme of a fixed nature, but the companies that say, well, you can work 3 days a week, we'll train you, but what you do in the other 2 days a week, you're on your own. So, yeah, what you do for your oldest and your youngest actually brings people together and improves your talent flow.
I do think platforms where the elderly can start their own businesses will be more important to get to your sense of autonomy, because I also think that AI replaces, I don't know the demographics of the 9 million Uber drivers, but they feel to me like they often are midlife, to your point, doing that autonomy.
Particularly in Asia.
But,
they all.
Yeah, but then, hearing the CEO of Uber at our event last week saying that within 10 to 20 years he thinks there will be no Uber drivers.
Yeah.
So getting into a workforce like that where those sort of jobs just go away, what else are those?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just wanted to open it up. We've got a few more minutes. Has anybody got a question? Go on.
Hi, I want to thank Andrew and Scott. And this evening, I'm leaving for Singapore FinTech Festival. I'm an ambassador of Singapore FinTech Festival last 10 years. And I'm also an ambassador for Global Women in AI. A lot of what you're talking about is very fantastic to me, but have seen it being practiced in the 4 oldest countries in the world, no longer European as they used to be 20 years ago. They are countries I've visited in the last 6 months: Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore. And in Japan, Mitsubishi, Sony, etc. are employing older workers, much older than me, in the mid-60s, early 70s, part-time, part-year, part-week, something I advocated in 2000. So it's happening in other parts of the world. Andrew knows about it, and I've also populated his book, but the practices in those countries are something we could learn from.
Totally agree.
Is it something you want to pick up on?
I totally agree with you that the UK and the West is far behind on this.
And FinTech is not AI. The speech I'm giving in Singapore FinTech Festival on the Catalyst stage, last year I talked about FinTech and sustainability, is called An Efficient, Equal Entrepreneurial World Needs FinTech. Why? I do insurance, pensions, and those kind of things. But most of all, as a gender advocate, I talk about why we can't bring in more women into the workforce and create more growth.
And has anyone got a question?
Hi, my name's Stephanie. Actually, a very similar theme. So Japan, I used to live in Japan and have family there. There is no national retirement age there. So you can work any time. I went there last April. The guy rowing my boat was 92, fit as a fiddle. How can we encourage more employers and society as a whole in this country to not be ageist? And particularly to Brent, sorry to single you out, but technology is obviously one of the biggest accelerators to society in the UK. And if we could embrace older people, coupled with that, we're potentially unlocking a huge amount of productivity. So what can we do as employers or as tech leaders or as society really help do this? Because it is happening in other countries. And just one thing about Uber. So I used to work at Uber. Most of them are immigrants. Most of them are over 50. Most of them are men. In China, we now have a lot of autonomous vehicles. They still require a driver to sit behind there, so they're just not touching the wheel. So they're not going to completely have no jobs.
Not for long.
We don't know, but obviously it is something that it is to think about. But yeah, hopefully there's other roles for them as well.
Yes, so just I take a bit of that. So yes, thank you. How do we make the elderly more employable in tech? I think it's to what I was trying to say clumsily, is that we make their skills more transparent. And I think AI enables them to be reskilled faster. So that's the benefit of AI. And platforms like LinkedIn enable those skills to be showcased more evidently. So I think it's a combination of those things that will work well.
Just a couple of things. I think the things that government can do as well. I think that Andrew talked about triple lock pensions and the cost of that. And the triple lock is very expensive, but what if we replaced it with an income tax benefit for people who work beyond a certain age? So you actually encourage employees to go to work, they get an income tax benefit at the age of whatever the state pension is, and you remove the triple lock. I also think there's something about the Employment Equalities Act and how we look at that and there's treatment of ageism. And the risk is that it actually doesn't help people who are more experienced later on in careers, and it does them harm because companies are terrified of creating new contracts or new terms of arrangements, or even having the conversation about could you do a similar type of role for less money, and that's a big, big barrier. So rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I can't give them less money, I can't ask them to work part-time, I can't worry about the fact they may not be working in 5 years' time, they then avoid giving them a job altogether. So I think there's stuff that government can do as well as business on this.
Can I give you an example with Amazon? Because 18 months ago when I walked into Amazon's boardroom, they were what I would call age blind. They weren't proactively trying to be ageist, but it was completely in their blind spot. No data or analysis about age of their consumers or their workforce. Yet every other data point I could possibly imagine. Nothing relating to age. And so the two things that moved the dial in Amazon was one is when you look at the volume of people that they hire globally, about 500,000 people a year, because they still have very high turnover rates, that they will literally run out of young people in a number of markets because we don't have that youth population coming through over the next 5-10 years. So doing a forecasting model around shrinking populations in certain markets, like you've talked about in Asia, has had to drive them recruiting older. But the biggest shift was around consumers. So 75% of the world's wealth is held by 50 to 70-year-olds. In the US, it's 83%. So if you are ignoring that demographic in terms of how you design products, how you advertise products, who you sell to, and you then not mirroring that demographic in the people in your workforce who are building product, creating the advertising, creating the solutions of the future, then you're wiping out 3/4 of the world's wealth who can afford to buy it. That was the thing that suddenly saw last year's Christmas advert, if you remember it, was a multi-generational cast and an older employee on stage being given a tuxedo. 6 weeks before that, it was just all about youth. So there are ways, you have to find the angle. In tech, I found, and in advertising, I found it's about chasing the wealth of the consumer and mirroring the population that you're serving, and then forecasting forward 5, 10, 15 years to see can they continue their growth with their current strategy.
Thank you. Are we out of time? Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Lyndsey, Octavius, and Brent.